Hi, good morning, everyone. We're so glad you're here this morning. I just want to wait one more minute so that people that haven't had a chance to log on or might be having audio-visual issues will have a minute to just make sure that they can get everything sorted out so they can see and hear everything from this morning's presentation. So I've been looking in the chat box. It's so wonderful to see everyone saying good morning. I wish we could see all of your faces. But yeah, please continue to utilize the chat box, and please do reach out and let us know if you're having any problems either hearing or seeing me. And the wonderful Lau Sharp is sitting behind the scenes, but definitely an integral part, and he will help you out. Good morning, good morning. Perfect. Well, it's 11 o'clock, and like I said, we're so glad to have you all online this morning. So this is, as everyone knows, this is the fourth session in our Urban Forestry Advocate Training Program, and we are just excited to dig into this topic. This is one of our favorite topics about comprehensive planning, and then doing a deep dive into conservation subdivisions and conservation subdivision ordinances. So we'll go ahead and advance here. Before we dig into the contents, I do want to go over some housekeeping things. So Crowdcast, the platform we're using, does have some unique features, so I want to go ahead and point those out. We have the polling feature, which is on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, sandwiched in between Ask a Question and People. And the polling feature, it really helps us collect information about you all as an audience. And believe us, we would not be able to put on this training session without you and this training series without you. So please continue to give us your feedback. You've all been so wonderful about that during the past 3 sessions. So we know that you will continue to do that. There are 2 poll questions up now. Note that those questions will not pop up automatically, but you will see a number 2 next to the word polls. Let me know if for some reason you don't see that. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll go ahead and open up the rest of the poll questions that'll give feedback on this particular session. Next, we have the question and answer section. This is really the place that if you have content-specific questions, that you can go ahead and write them in here. So please don't write content-specific questions in the chat box, because we don't want them to get all mixed up. In this question and answer feature, we really do have everything organized, and you can upvote a question. If you all see in the video, the video that's moving on screen. Next to the question, there is an up arrow. And if you had the same question as someone else that presented that question that's on the screen, you can just click that up arrow, and that's just let us know, okay, more than one person has this question. Obviously, we need to go over this. And the last feature is the chat box. And that's exactly what you've been doing, is exactly what it's there for, to say hello, to say, hey, I can't see you, hey, I can't hear you. Please continue to chat with us throughout the webinar. I can't personally see the chat box, but Lau is in the chat box, and he is our master chat box runner, and he's just doing wonderful with that. So Lau will see that, and he will let me know if there's something that we need to stop, or if something's blurry. That's the best place to let us know about things like that. And we also, like I said, we could not do this alone. So we want to say a quick thank you to the USDA Forest Service, the South Carolina Forestry Commission, for being partners in making this webinar series possible and providing funding for us to do this work. Also, all of the South Carolina local planners, arborists, foresters, urban foresters, volunteers, board and commission members, and forestry advocates, you all have really been stepping up throughout this whole series and letting us know what your needs are as a community. And we really need you to continue doing that so that we can keep these training sessions relevant. As you know, this is the 4th session out of 5, and then we're going to be kind of opening up the floor and being open to additional topics. So we do really want to know, what else do you want training on? What else do you want information on? We want to make this as relevant as possible to the work that you do on the ground. So please continue to give us feedback, and thank you for doing that. Now we have Frances Waite, who is on the line and is here audio only, but she is here. And Frances Waite is from the South Carolina Forestry Commission's Urban and Community Forestry Program. She's the program coordinator. And Frances and the program, all of the urban foresters and foresters, really work tirelessly to foster, support, and enhance long-term sustainable urban and community forestry programs within communities in South Carolina. They provide technical assistance, education, financial assistance to cities, towns, nonprofit organizations, state and county governments. So a big thank you to Frances and all the work that her and her fellow program members do. And thank you for that. And my name is Chris Lepetiuk, and I'm a member of Plan Green. We advocate for the preservation of natural resources and green infrastructure, and as an organization are especially interested in the procedural challenges and opportunities that are presented when local governments engage in natural resource conservation. We really believe that all people, no matter their station in life, have a given right to a clean, healthy, and green environment in which to live. So, excited to bring this information to you. Thank you again for being on this webinar. As a reminder, this training really came out of the community saying, hey, we need information on urban forestry and how to advocate for urban forestry in our communities. And it's designed to give South Carolina Board and Commission members the tools they need to plan healthy and vibrant communities. We have already, and we will continue to review the ways in which trees can be used to achieve community goals. We've provided case studies on how other communities have been successful, and we reviewed and presented software and policy reports available to board and commission members. Just as a note, that if you missed any of the 3 previous sessions, these are all available online for free. Just go to the South Carolina Forestry Commission's website, and under Urban and Community Forestry, you will see the previous 3 sessions listed. Those are YouTube links. Just go ahead and click on them. It's online. We wish that we were able to offer credit when you view the webinar after it's already been aired, when it's not live anymore. But we've reached out to ISA, we've reached out to APA and SCPEAC, and unfortunately their rule is that the webinars must be attended live to receive credit. So we wish that we could change that, but that's their policy and not ours. So what kind of credit can you receive for participating live? You can get ISA credits, you can get AICP, which are planners credits, and then the other one that you can get is SCPEAC credits. And I know that's been confusing for a lot of people through this series so far, but that's the South Carolina Planning Education Advisory Committee, and that's the organization that is accrediting your planning commission, board member, continuing education units. So if you've been attending, you know this drill, but I'll go ahead and go through it. But go ahead and type in the chat box at the end of the presentation that you want credits. I'll reach out to you. I have your email addresses through Crowdcast if you provided it that way, and I'll go ahead and provide you either with a certificate, or I'll just go ahead and log your credits depending on what crediting organization you need credits from. I just wanted to give kind of a roadmap of where we have been and where we are going. So the training schedule really consists of 5 trainings. And in the first one, we went over broad urban forestry benefits such as community building, public health, maximizing development profits, economic benefits, all of those benefits of why should we care about urban forestry. And the second session was a case study. So it was planning and urban forestry, showing how 2 communities in the South have really made their urban forestry programs integral to their planning operations, all aspects of their planning operations. Last session was a tools session, and I know that was kind of a rapid fire session, so I hope you all recovered. It was kind of warp speed for me as well. But in that session, we went over the existing software, the reports, the guidelines to help board and commission members, planners, arborists, etc., really incorporate urban forestry into their community processes. And if for some reason you did not receive that, if for some reason you didn't receive the resource sheet, which was given out after that session, there's a link on this page. I know that you will not be able to copy this crazy link, but I'm going to give out these slides directly following the presentation, and you'll be able to copy and paste that off the slides. So again, that's for downloading the resource sheet, which was from session 3. And that was really to look at which tools are best for your community and to be able to utilize them to their fullest potential. As we know, a tool is only as good as the capacity that you have to use it, and who's on your team, and what commitment you have to using it. So it really went through at what stage of urban forestry programming is your community and what's the next step for you. So again, if you didn't receive that, please use that Dropbox link, download it. It is for free. It is yours. Today, we are going to be taking an in-depth look at comprehensive planning and incorporating urban forestry into the comprehensive plan. Then we're going to be taking a deep dive into conservation subdivisions and really looking at, why should we care? What are the benefits of a conservation subdivision? What is the alternative? What should a conservation subdivision look like? And what should it not look like, which is sometimes as important? And then looking at some key components of conservation subdivision ordinances that will make them more successful in your community, and some resources that go along with that. Okay? By the end of the webinar, you should really be able to identify specific ways that your community can incorporate urban forestry into your comprehensive planning process. And you should be able to be thinking about, should my community adopt a conservation subdivision ordinance? And should my community be educating developers about conservation subdivisions? And if we do want to adopt an ordinance, what things need to be included in that ordinance? And I do want to note that this will not give you enough information that you can just develop an ordinance from these slides, but it gives you some other sources of information that you can take and look more into so that you can do that kind of work around ordinances and education. Okay, I think by now you all realize that I like roadmaps, so this is our next roadmap. This is our roadmap into incorporating urban forestry into the comprehensive planning process. The first step is really mapping the existing natural resources, including the urban forest. As you all know, we can't plan anything until we know what we have in front of us. So what kind of a map, and I apologize, it's showing over top of this image, but what kind of a map do we need of our existing natural resources? It's a good question. I'm showing you so you just saw one map on the screen before, and now I'm showing you two different kind of maps. So the map that you see on the left-hand side of your screen now is showing individual trees. And lots of communities have this kind of map, and it's very useful for urban forest management with regards to tree species, with regards to pest control. But it is less useful when we're looking at comprehensive planning and looking at the urban forest as a whole. On the right, you see a map of natural resource cores. So this is showing you the large-scale natural resources that are ranked highest to lowest. I don't want to say that, if it's a good core, it is bad. It's absolutely still important, but we really want to be working on protecting our most highly ranked natural resource cores. I'm going to go back for 1 minute and just talk about the logistics of how you even figure out where your cores are. So you're going to need two kinds of inputs for this information. You're going to need aerial imagery. As you see on the picture on the screen on the right, you see the aerial image. If you were an airplane flying over the sky, that is what your community looks like. And then on the left, in green, has been highlighted trees. Yeah, has been highlighted trees. So you can see where your urban forest is. So far, this doesn't show where your rivers and your streams are and all the other natural resources, wetlands, etc. That comes a little bit later. But just knowing where your trees are is the first step. And if you do not have that kind of information yet, please go back to session 3 and look at the tools that can help you map your urban forest. There are a lot of tools from very expensive to very inexpensive that can help you to do this kind of work to at least develop a preliminary map. Okay, and then once you have a preliminary map, we start to look at forest cores and corridors, or patches and corridors. You might be asking, what is this patch? What is this corridor? But a forest core or a forest patch is a relatively intact habitat that is sufficiently large to support more than one individual of a species. So the greater number of interior species that you have present, the more highly ranked and the more important it is to preserve the forest core. It gets a little bit more complicated again when we put into the mix things like water resources. If you have a forest core or a forest patch that has something like a stream running through it, that also ranks it more highly. And it's important to be talking about forest cores and corridors, because there are some species that are very sensitive to forest fragmentation, such as the ovenbird here, the green tree frog, and they really, once those forest cores are gone and they don't have anywhere to live, they obviously very much struggle as a species. And not to mention, people struggle. People want green corridors, people want forests to walk through and to enjoy. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about mapping the urban forest. We've talked a little bit about forest cores and corridors, mapping those, and why is that important. Other information that we want to include on our natural resources map are things like you see in the photos: wetlands, meadows, non-tree vegetation. These also are very important to our ecosystem as a whole. And we want to be able to rank our cores and corridors more highly when they include these features. So when we're looking at rivers, streams, wetlands, seeps, and springs, if we're protecting the urban forestry, the urban trees around these resources, we're doing a lot. We are shading the water, so we're keeping that temperature down. We are also reducing sedimentation. That forest is collecting the sediment and it's collecting the nutrients so it doesn't get into our water. And it's really making that a viable habitat for the river, for the fish that live in that ecosystem, and that's important for our recreation. Then we look at meadows. We all know that pollinators are very important, especially now. They're very important to us we depend on them for much of our food source, with regard to pollinating our agricultural plants. So protecting those meadows is also critical, and we want to make sure we get those habitats on the map. Okay, so we've talked about what we need on our maps. Now, and we've even talked a little bit about ranking those natural resources area by conservation priority, right? If you have water going through that, that's a higher ranking. Now, we want to talk about a little bit, I want to talk about a little bit of a lesser, I would say a more nuanced view of ranking natural resources, specifically with regards to the urban forest. Not all trees are created equal. If we look at this picture, we see three very different settings for our trees. We see a tree lawn on the left-hand side. We see an intact forest here in the middle. And then we see a plaza on the right-hand side. So the tree lawn is providing an ecosystem service by shading the sidewalk and shading the street. It's prolonging the life of the asphalt on the street, and it's making it more comfortable for people to walk on the sidewalk. This photo in the middle is showing you more of a recreation or a mental health or well-being benefit, where you can walk through the forest and you can feel calm, your heart rate goes down, you are healthier because you are getting some exercise. That's the benefit there. And then on the right-hand side, we're looking at a plaza. So those trees are providing shading for the people that are sitting in the plaza. It's also providing a cultural context around this statue. If you can imagine this location without trees, it would look very different. Okay, so we want to consider the other values of trees have when we're looking at our ranking, not just, is it a tree, but in what context are those trees and what value do they provide, especially people? And that's what we're going to talk about now. So how does an intact urban forest impact people? So as you might remember from webinar 1, simply planting a tree near one's home already increases the property value. That's one benefit. Also, like I said, there's mental health and these well-being benefits where people feel calmer, people are healthier, people walk further. Well, I'm going to highlight now as a community, this is in Columbia, Maryland, and the map in the middle is showing you these different villages they have set up, but the important part of what I show you are these green lines, and I hope you all can see my cursor as I'm kind of going around here. But these green lines show walking and biking paths, and these are not accessible to vehicles. What the community has really done is they have made all areas, all aspects of the community accessible by walking and biking, and that includes the community college, as you see down here. That includes parks, village centers, it includes the hospital, it includes schools, I'm saying elementary, middle schools, so you really address this problem of even childhood obesity through the urban forest by providing these corridors that are wide enough for both people to travel through and for animals to travel through. And what a difference that makes in someone's life when they're able to experience urban nature as they are just walking to school, or as they are, let's say they were just released from the hospital and they're able to walk a little bit and get some fresh air and begin their recovery process in that way. Adding to the layer of complexity, it really depends on your community's goals. So for example, not every community is Columbia, Maryland, and public gathering spaces, for example, may not be a pressing need in your community. Therefore, it's really important to take a look and know what your community's goals are before you complete the natural resource ranking process. So for example, if you're a community that is really focused right now on economic development and you want to revitalize a downtown area, to do so, you should really be thinking about, what does your downtown area look like? Downtown areas that are green, that are inviting, that are cool, they are much more likely to do well economically because those are spaces that people want to be in. And as we mentioned in webinar 1, that is also people will buy things for more money when there are trees around. So what a great benefit. The trees will pay you back for this. So really making sure that you're including downtown trees and urban trees that do well in urban environments especially is important in that section. But providing those urban trees in those spaces to promote your economic development. Where does this come in with comprehensive planning? Well, in the economic development section of your comprehensive plan, there should definitely be a subsection devoted to how urban forestry can help you achieve your goals of economic development. The next one that we're going to talk about is preservation of cultural resources. You may have cultural resources that really depend on the context and where they sit. When I say the context, I mean, what does it look like behind that cultural resource? Is it forested? Is that the way it would have looked in the past? If so, that it might be very important to preserve that forest, which is behind the resource, to keep that space looking relevant. So that may be an important part of your tourism element, for example. Just want to mention that trees really do touch every aspect of our communities. And our job as advocates, as urban forestry lovers, let's say, let's not get too crazy, but our job is to make those connections in not just our minds, but also in our planning documents and in our planning processes in our communities. So to advocate for that kind of connection, you have no idea what kind of impact you can be making on someone down the road just by making sure that's a part of your community's process. And while I'm off on a tangent, I just want to also mention that with COVID-19 still being very fresh in our minds, we are in a moment in history that we have never seen before where more people can work remotely than ever. And we're seeing an entire sector of the economy choose to live somewhere far from where their job was located because they want to live somewhere else, because it's greener, because it's warmer, because it's less expensive. Whatever the reasons are, it is really the moment in our communities to step up and make sure that our communities are a place where people want to live, because we have an entire layer of people in our economy that are not tied to a place. So this is a time to make sure that your community is somewhere that people really want to live. Okay, the next topic in the comprehensive planning process is community cohesion and engagement. So this may look like open spaces. This may look like gathering spaces, parks, etc. And of course, we all know that it is very, very hot in the South. So to shade those open spaces, those gathering spaces, this is critical. Because if there's no shading there, no one will sit there. If it's just an open lawn, it's a completely unprogrammed space, it's not going to succeed. So incorporating that in your community cohesion and engagement plan, even if that looks like in your community, it looks like a community gardening space that on the edge of it, so to not block the sun for the plants, on the edge of it, if that is shaded, that's perfect. That absolutely helps your community reach your goals. Another element of the comprehensive plan is affordable housing. So this can look like a couple of things. If your community has prioritized affordable housing, you realize that's an area where your community wants to or needs to grow, that can look like a conservation subdivision that includes affordable housing units, a certain percentage. Or it could be something more simple. It could be something like a program that helps people identify where they should be planting trees around their homes to help reduce heating and cooling costs. That's an element of this. So again, looking at your community goals and really including that in your comprehensive plan as to how urban forestry can help you achieve that goal. Last one we're going to look at is affordable housing. The last one we're going to look at is providing transportation options. Transportation options, again, it is so hot in South Carolina. I know that we're all already starting to feel just what's coming. And if we're looking at especially alternative transportation options like biking, like walking, like access to buses, we need to really be cooling those spaces in which people are walking, biking, or getting to the bus stop. If our goal is to reduce carbon emissions or to clean our air, then we need to reduce the reliance on vehicles. And alternative transportation is a great way to do that. So again, that's an element of your comprehensive plan. Be sure that you're including how urban forestry helps you achieve that aspect. Okay. All right, so we talked about ranking natural resources area by conservation priority, and we also got into a little bit of community goals and how you should be connecting that. One of the next things that you're going to want to look at is overlaying existing or future land use to see potential conflicts. This is a mapping project that came out of Richland County, South Carolina. And what they've done is they've mapped their cores and corridors, and then they did what's called a heat map to determine development pressure and development intensity. So they used their zoning as an input, and then they also used information that they had about, where they know people want to live, so that they can figure out, what's likely to be developed soon. Zoning isn't the only way to look at this question. Becomes something that can be zoned commercial, but it's in a location where no one's really planning a commercial development. That's not very helpful for your community to know. But if you use both of these elements, this is absolutely much more helpful. So this community was then able to see the red, for example, is where there is more development pressure and more development intensity, and the green is where there is less. So if, for example, they had a highly ranked core somewhere here, or a corridor somewhere going through here, it would be in that community's best interest to protect that natural resource. One of the most obvious, or the thing that comes to mind first, would be to change the zoning map. But that can be a longer process, and there are other tools which you can also use that might be more friendly. So that's what we're coming to now, is employing planning tools to connect high-quality urban forests and protect forest cores and corridors. So one of these tools is called the Purchase of Development Rights, also known as a PDR, if you see that anywhere, PDR, Purchase of Development Rights. And what happens in a PDR is that a private landowner sells their development rights to their property to the local government. The local government then buys the development rights, the land is protected, the landowner is compensated, and they may even be eligible for state, federal tax credits, more incentive to engage in this kind of purchase of development rights. This example is from Stafford, Virginia. You can see that this is a relatively large parcel just by the scale. You see it's very large. And it was an important forest core that you see is already fragmented, so wanted to prevent further fragmentation. And the benefits of this purchase of development rights is that it's permanent protection, right? The development right is now with the municipality. What's also a benefit is that the landowner is compensated fairly, and that they receive further compensation through reduction of taxes. There are definite challenges with this kind of planning tool, and one of those challenges is funding. It is not cheap to buy development rights, and most municipalities have to leverage several sources of funding in order to engage in this. In addition, there has to be an agreement on the ordinance language and provisions. So, for example, let's say this property owner sold the development rights, but he wanted to have, a space for his grandchild or his child to build a home on the property. That's not a large disruption of this very large property. So figuring out, what is allowed when the development rights are sold. So there has to definitely be agreement on that, and the best way to do that is through a committee or through a group of people that helps determine these kinds of things as they come up, and helps to think about what can come up in the future and what the county or the municipality will do when these questions arise. The next section that we have is on transfer of development rights. This is similar to a purchase of development rights, and the development rights are purchased and sold and purchased. But in this scenario, the municipality is not the middle. The municipality, the the municipality does not act as the middleman, it acts as the organizer to say, where can development rights be sold, where can they be received, and that's organized by these sending zones and these receiving zones. So this is probably confusing. I'm gonna direct everyone to take a look at this graphic here. So this is what is called a sending zone, and this is an area of the municipality that may include wetlands. It may include some sensitive, some highly ranked natural resource, forest core, etc., that we do not want that level of density that is permitted for in the zoning. And then we have another area of the municipality that is without wetlands. Let's say it's relatively low quality habitat. Let's say it's a lot of bare earth already, kind of shrubby mix with not a lot of sensitive species. So it makes more sense to have more density and have more housing units on that area of the municipality. So you have to determine these sending zones and these receiving zones. And again, the municipality would be the one responsible for that. Sometimes you can also allow for greater floor area, increased building heights, etc., when you have a transfer of development rights. And that's, again, up to the municipality. This is more permanent natural resource, more permanent natural resource protection. But there's a lot more legwork from the municipality's role to really get this all set up. And there must be a lot of education for developers, for community members, so that they know what this is and so that everyone agrees that this is not a bad thing for the community. There should be public meetings held about this, et cetera, because you really don't want to just implement something like this and not have input. So this does really require more legwork to get started. And again, you want to have a group of people who can speak to what happens when a question comes up about a TDR. Another tool that we have are tree cover requirements by zoning. This is something a community can consider. It's a strategy whereby the zoning of the property, and this is over the entire municipality, determines the minimum amount of tree canopy coverage required. So for example, if we look in the table on the right-hand side, we have single-family residential, residential small lot, single-family zones. And this community, this is an example. This is not law. So, don't take this copy and paste and say we should do this. But for those kinds of zoning, they have decided that the minimum tree canopy cover as a percentage of the lot area should be 33%. For multifamily residential, it should be 20, commercial should be 15, industrial 10, et cetera, et cetera. And I do want to point out that this municipality has included that in their downtown zones, they should have 12%, industrial 10. A lot of municipalities, they go about doing this and they say, okay, well, in our downtown, we don't need any because it's very dense already. And our industrial, we don't need any because it's industrial. I do not advocate for those percentages being zero. Because as we know, in our downtown zones, we absolutely need urban tree canopy as much as we need them in all of our other settings. So 0% is never something you want to see. And if that comes up in your community, definitely advocate for increasing that. So the benefit of this tool is you have targeted tree canopy plantings and retainage. And one of the challenges is that you need to know what your tree canopy coverage is by zoning already. Because you can't say that, it's going to be 35% in single family when you don't know which percentage you have right now. And that may be, far above what your community can handle in terms of the existing tree canopy that is already there. So first, you have to have a tree inventory completed. You have to know what your tree canopy coverages are by zoning. Perfect. And then the next thing, which this slide might seem a little bit obvious, but when you're looking at the comprehensive plan, it's really best to look at the other documents that you have regarding urban forestry, such as the Urban Forest Management Plan, if you have one, and it's okay if you do not. But for example, a tree maintenance schedule, a tree planting schedule, looking at your budgeting and funding, there you really want to be linking these documents and the elements in these documents to the comprehensive plan to strengthen the case for urban forestry. Increases in program funding and staff may also be mentioned in the comprehensive plan as a strategy to grow or maintain the urban forest. So when we say best management practices, we're really talking about best management practices around urban forestry and the processes that a community takes to build and grow the urban forest. Again, just looking at the other documentation that you have or what you want to develop and linking that to your comprehensive plan so that everything acts as a cohesive unit and you have the best chance of achieving your community's urban forestry goals. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift a little bit and we're going to look at conservation subdivisions. And I see that this text is a little bit off of the slide, so I apologize for that. But what we're going to look at are what are conservation subdivisions, what are the benefits and principles of designing conservation subdivisions, what should you not do when designing permitting conservation subdivisions, and as you see on the left-hand side of the screen, it's a very simplified graphic, but it explains very well what a conservation subdivision, the principles behind it are. So on the left-hand side of this graphic, we have kind of the typical subdivision where you have a long driveway, you have each lot being very, very cleared, it's maximum space on each lot, and you have basically all of the forest is fragmented, around these little boxes. So, studies have shown that people don't really like mowing a lot of lawn. So people don't really like this very much. And unfortunately, it really does. It eliminates a lot of the forest that was there on the site. So instead of that, what we want to do is we can give everyone a smaller lot, which can be controversial, but if you look at it as what are the people that are living there, what are they gaining? They're basically gaining a forested park in their subdivision. And as we learned from webinar 1, the properties that are most valued economically are those that have access to green space, and those that are walking distance to a park are valued even more highly. And that's not by just people with children or people who like birds. That is across the board. We see that people really like to have access to a park. What are the benefits of conservation subdivisions? Basically, why should we care? So conservation subdivisions are most simply defined as spaces that nurture both nature and people. A significant percentage of the natural landscape is preserved during the development process, and it's thoughtfully woven into the fabric of the subdivision. So it's woven into the fabric and the life of that subdivision. As we talked about, we know that homes are valued higher and sell faster when they're closer to green space. And we also know that if we lower our nutrient runoffs by shading our streams, by providing forest buffers, we are going to have healthier streams and lower nutrient runoffs. So that is absolutely critical. And I know I've said this a bunch, but I think it's really important. But we've seen over and over again in studies, they say that neighborhoods with quality green landscapes have lower levels of stress and stronger social cohesion, even when mediated for socioeconomic impacts. So that's just not, wealthy people or people who are not wealthy. It is, if you take out all socioeconomic impacts, people are more connected and they have lower levels of stress when they have access to green space in their communities. And again, what a wonderful thing that we can give to our community members. Lower levels of stress? That sounds great to me. If you need more more benefits of urban forestry, especially in the spaces where we live. Don't forget that we have reduced symptoms, reduced need for medication for ADHD, reduced dropout rates, reduced violent and nonviolent incidents and costs, reduced incidence and severity of cardiovascular disease, reduced medications for patients, increased air quality, increased water quality, just by providing quality natural spaces for people in near the spaces where they live, work, and play. So again, back to principles of conservation subdivisions. So maybe the question from a developer would be, well, I preserve some trees on the site. Is that a conservation subdivision? And the answer to that would be no. You really want to be you need to be buffering water features, 100 to 300 feet, depending on the river classification. If it is a larger river or a larger stream, you need to be providing that larger buffer. Buffering streams, seeps, springs, headwaters, all of that, at least 50 to 100 feet. And again, that's really to protect the water quality, and you can protect the natural life that is living in those water systems. And if you have a space in a conservation subdivision that is protected and it is operating as a natural resource and as a stream should, then what a great learning space you've just provided for example, the children or the students that are living in that subdivision. Another aspect which is really critical, and I think sometimes people miss this one, the second bullet here, is it's critical to place these conservation subdivisions in areas are close to the things people need. So, what do we need as a community? We probably need a grocery store, or maybe we need an urban farm, or maybe we need a farm in general, or we need a place to work. We need schools. You want to place these things. We want to place these conservation subdivisions close to the things that people are going to day in and day out, because we really want to minimize air pollution, especially from vehicles. We know that's one of the most polluting things that we have is transportation systems. And we also want to increase their quality of life. I've never heard someone say, I just love to drive an hour and a half one way to work. I've never heard that. I've never felt that way. So we want to place these subdivisions in close to where these people want and need to live. Next, we want to connect on-site preserved nature to off-site preserved nature, and that gets back to the beginning of the slideshow. We were talking about our cores and our corridors. So if we see our larger map, and then we see our parcel, and we see that there is a corridor that runs through our site, we need to preserve that corridor to allow wildlife to pass through and also to allow people to pass through. It's funny how we need so many similar things. You also want to use low impact development technology and design. So that can be things like green stormwater management systems. That can be things like permeable pavement. That can be rain gardens. That can be bioswales. And, if you look at this from all the aspects of a community site, this can also, it increases water quality by filtering stormwater runoff, but it also can be a demonstration project so that people in the community can learn about this. Maybe it can be a workforce development project where people kind of learn about these things and they say, I'm interested in that. Let me find more about stormwater design, and I can, do something like that in my career. So you never know what you might spark just by providing this for people in their community. You also want to provide quality gathering spaces and places for people to enjoy and appreciate nature. We've talked about this a lot, where it's a quality gathering space versus a not quality gathering space, but I think it's really important to keep talking about this, because studies have shown again and again that just providing a space for people doesn't ensure that people are going to use that space. It doesn't provide that social cohesion we were talking about and that we so desire for our communities. Instead, they have to be programmed in some way. I'm not saying that it has to have for example, a basketball court. Basketball courts are great, but it could be something much more simple. Like it could be just a demonstration garden. It could be a place where someone has planted kitchen herbs and, for example, children can come by and smell the herbs and someone can grab some when they're on their way home from work or whatever it is, but some minor programmatic element. The next one we want to talk about is specifying ongoing maintenance and safety principles. For example, fire-wise design. If you are a community that is prone to fire, obviously you need to be including fire-wise design and in your specifications. And the best person to really talk about that is the South Carolina Forestry Commission. If you have questions about that, please just type in the chat box, and Francis, I'm sure, will get back to you about that. But about specifying ongoing maintenance, there has to be some way that these conservation subdivisions are maintained into the future, because we protected this natural resource for the next generation. We protected it so that we could continue to live in that space and enjoy it. And without having that ongoing maintenance, you're not ensuring that, basically. So ongoing maintenance, if that's through something like an HOA, that's great. Okay, and in the design process, so as we've already talked about, this ties in with mapping and the comprehensive plan, because you've identified your conservation areas. So that was the first step. Next, you need to identify connection paths and networks on-site and off-site, so connecting the preserved nature on-site to the preserved nature off-site. And then you need to identify potential home sites based on the remaining area and density limitations. That's pretty much a given. You also want to ground truth using aerial imagery and site visits and revise that as needed. For example, you might go on a site visit and you might see that there is a spring or a seep somewhere on that site that you didn't know about. It's not on the map. So really, ground truthing is critical. And finally, establishing lot lines. Okay, this is, I'm switching a little bit gears here, and this is because this webinar is really developed for board and commission members. So the things that you need to be thinking about are making sure that there are incentives to provide subdivision ordinances, conservation subdivisions, over other kinds of subdivisions. I would say conventional subdivisions. So what do I mean by that? That it should be easier to receive approval for a conservation subdivision than a conventional subdivision. There are different ways that you can do that. You can offer density bonuses, you can offer increased heights, you can offer increased floor area, whatever it is, but there should be incentives for people to engage in this kind of development as opposed to conventional development. And just a note on density bonuses, that you should offer a bonus that is large enough to be an incentive, to be a bonus to the developer, but it shouldn't be too large to overload infrastructure resources. So you don't want to have, a density bonus that is so great that all of a sudden you can't provide enough public water for the site. That seems obvious, but we've seen communities do that, and it was too much. Some other components are, be sure that development of natural resource maps are required, first of all, and they're reviewed for green infrastructure connections on-site and off-site. We can't say that enough. Be sure that you are connecting the nature that you set out to protect. Next, require buffers of natural resources. Take a look back at a couple slides previously to see what those buffers should be. And require at least 35% open space for conservation. We said 35%. Some people say as high as 50, but I think that you need to be flexible with that. You really need to look at your site and look at how highly ranked those natural resources are and what are the development pressures in your community. So at least 35%, but do that analysis to know how much should be conserved. and, as we said, require ongoing maintenance of the subdivision and preservation of open spaces into perpetuity. Another really important factor is that you need to be educating and providing assistance to developers and community members. If people don't know what this is, it can be scary to them. It can seem like this, greeny thing, and that's coming to their community, and they want to know what it is, and developers want to know how to do it. So handouts and guides to explain conservation subdivision design, and the local regulations for conservation subdivisions can be very important. Providing technical assistance, you might need to hold their hand a little bit if they haven't done this before. I do want to mention that a guide was written about conservation subdivision design. I flipped this slide to show you this bullet point here, called Forest Connectivity in Developing Landscapes, a design guide for conservation developments. And that was written for North Carolina and South Carolina. So this can be a great guide to give out to developers. Again, I am going to provide these slides as soon as we log off. And you can just take this link and visit this guide. The other resources that are listed here are helping specifically with creation of conservation subdivision ordinances. That's not to say that's the only thing that's important is the ordinance. It's definitely not. But the first step is having a mechanism by which people can actually create these conservation subdivisions. That's why it's listed here. It's its own separate thing. So again, you will have these slides, you will have these links. Not to worry about that. Now, I see that we only have 5 more minutes, and I do want to allow a couple of minutes for questions, and I do want to allow Frances to jump on audio so that she can tell us about something that's not related to conservation subdivision, but it is related to arborist certification and a way that people can get certified as arborists.
Hey, Chris, you want me to say that now?
Yes.
So, I just wanted to thank Dina Whitesides for working with the Southern Chapter of ISA to put together an ISA Certified Arborist Exam Prep. So it's going to be a 2-day workshop. It's going to be October 5th and 6th in 2021. And it's going to be in Columbia at our Harbison Environmental Education Center. So I'll put the link up as well so people can, share that information, or if they want to, utilize it as well. But I'll put it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Frances. And I'm just clicking back into the chat, into the question and answers. So I'm just taking a look at the questions here by Eric Schultz. Can you clarify the terms used in the percent canopy table example? Is the percentage goal in individual lots or total tract acres? So the percentage goal was by individual lots. I hope that answered the question, Eric. And then Larissa Gangloff had a question. She said, have you ever lived in a community such as Columbia, Maryland? How did it affect you? Are there any drawbacks? So while we've got a few minutes, I'll go ahead and answer it. So I have actually lived there, and the benefit to having a very connected community is that you can actually walk, you can bike to anywhere, and that does truly improve one's quality of life. It improves your health, both physical and mental health. And any drawbacks is that you can, from a community perspective of looking at something like policing, that can be very hard to access some of these more remote walking paths. But in that community, they actually adjusted by providing their policing force with bicycles and with mopeds that could access those locations that a car could not. So that's more of a nuanced situation. But I hope that answered the question, Larissa.
And Chris, did you see where Allison had asked a question about the HOAs? And I know you had a link up there, and then I was chatting with Nancy Stairs, and she says that North Carolina has a guide that addresses that Ed Macy helped. And I've got that PDF, so we could send that out if it's if it's a different publication, it might be the same one that you were mentioning, but.
Sure. It definitely, if you can put that in the chat, Francis, that way, in case it's different, everyone has it.
I'll send it to you because I'm not sure how to do the PDF, but I'll send it to you just right now.
That's fine. And everyone that's still on the webinar, which I hope you are, I can send out an email to everyone that was logged on that has this resource that Francis is talking about. So no one's going to lose it. You know, for example, if I put it in the chat, it's not like you're going to click out and never see that resource. So perfect. I know that some people have already gone in and clicked into the polls. I have just opened those up. If you don't mind, please go ahead and answer those so that we can have information on, you know, what do you think about this topic? And, you know, if you have any other ideas for us of things that you want more information on, maybe that this webinar addressed, or maybe that it didn't, and you would have liked it to address, that's absolutely critical. Please go ahead, either send me an email or just type it into the chat box below. I'm going to go ahead and include my email again in the chat box just to be sure that everyone has it if they need to communicate regarding, you know, session topics or CEUs. But that's really all we have for you this morning. Thank you again for logging on. We really love to have you all participating. I love to look in the chat box and see everyone saying hello. I hope that everyone, I saw a couple people said they lost the connection. Please know that the recording is going to be available, and it will be available on the website in a couple of days. It will also be available this afternoon just through the Crowdcast site. Just visit the same link that you used to log into this session, and instead of showing you the session, it's going to show you the recording of the session. So again, I apologize if we had some technical difficulties. Know that you absolutely did not miss anything. You will still get your CEUs, and just click back into this session later on this afternoon and you can see the recording. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Everyone have a great day. We really appreciate you. Perfect. I see something from Eric. City of Charleston ratified a new conservation development ordinance. Call or email for it. Okay. Everyone saw that from Eric? Perfect. Okay. Thank you, everyone. You have a great day.